Welcome to day 2 of our journey down the road to the NBA trade deadline, a video series where I'm making a video every day talking about an NBA trade up until February 8th, which is the NBA trade deadline. And I try to focus on trade ideas that are not the ones you're hearing on the national media or your favorite podcasts, but just different weird ones. Some of them may be a little bit more unrealistic than others, but just kind of as a thought experiment. Now, I covered sending Zach LaVine to the Orlando Magic yesterday, so I guess I didn't start too subtle. But if you like this concept or just the type of content, be sure to leave likes on these videos. As a small channel, it helps me out significantly. And let me know in those comments down below, what do you think about some of these trade ideas? Am I crazy? Are there some points here, or are these some good trades? And of course, be sure to subscribe and ring that notification bell so you can stay in the know on when I drop tomorrow's video. So today's a little different. It's not necessarily an individual player question, but a question for an organization and the direction they're heading. If you're on Twitter or X, a really interesting guy to follow is Zodiac GM. He does a lot of sports coverage, and it's about, well, of course, the astrology of each of, a player group he picks out or whatever, but he talks about the Houston Rockets a fair bit. And why the vibes don't seem to be as immaculate as they should with bringing in Fred VanVleet and Dillon Brooks and spending all that money. This is the most recent in that chain of conversations, but really interesting guy to follow. Of course, also follow me. And that is the kind of start, the jumping off point, if you will, to this question, this concept. So we have to look at the Rockets in the standings currently. The Warriors could make a jump, but I really think they're just going to try to set themselves up for next year. They're usually not a team that wants to be mediocre. They're a team that's like, oh, if we're going to be really bad this year, it's to make us really good next year. So I kind of see them maybe doing that. But they do have some big decisions to make, so they could bump themselves up this little chain here. The Lakers, very known for doing trades, especially towards the trade deadline. So I wouldn't be surprised if they did something that bumps them up a couple spots. And the Jazz, going off of last year, they had their hot streak and then they fell off, so maybe they do it again, but you're not in a great position. You're 3 games behind them, so you're not horribly out of space, but you need to do something to make this jump. You're under 500, and spending all that money and being under 500 is not a good look for the front office. So, as an organization, you have to answer 2 questions. We are the youngest team in the NBA. Do we focus on development over winning? And if we do that, do we need to clear some space to get more of these guys run? If that is not the case, then the question you have to ask is, do we want to get some of these younger pieces off of our books to a team that's maybe looking towards a rebuild to get some talent that helps us now? Can we make a playoff run with a Fred VanVleet, Dillon Brooks-led starting 5? So if you're starting on the first question and say, yes, we're the youngest team in the NBA, we need to develop some of our younger players. Cool. Jalen Green's a starter. Also gets, he's in terms of minutes and usage high up there. Jabari Smith Jr. is also up there. And Sengun is up there. But you have Terry Eason, Cam Whitmore, Jason Tate, Whitmore and Thompson not getting a ton of run. Like, they'll get minutes, but they're not really getting minutes. So it's the question of, are we moving some pieces around to maybe facilitate those guys getting more run for hopes of being really good next year or the next year before these contracts expire? Or, do you try to hit the middle ground of developing players and being good, or do you kind of just understand maybe we're not going to be great because we've got a bunch of young players that need to kind of learn the NBA? Well, if we're going that route, we're developing players, you're obviously not getting rid of Fred VanVleet or Dillon Brooks because you just signed them, and if you trade them, it makes you look really really weird as a front office. So you kind of bump down the list. Jalen Green, someone you've dedicated a lot of time to, has not taken the steps you've wanted him to. Do you hold on to him? Do you trade him? Jeff Green's expiring. You could trade him, and I think that's probably fine. Victor Oladipo, not even playing. Trade him, expiring contract, great. Jock Lundell, similar situation. Boban, Aaron Holiday, Reggie Bullock. You've got some pieces to trade in order to maybe get some of these younger guys run, but you don't want to get rid of all of them, obviously. You do need a little bit of depth. So I think if you're doing that, you have a couple of options. The first one is you go to the Magic, say, hey, Jalen Green has just not been what we wanted him to be. We kind of wanted him to be the first option. That didn't work out. Now he's kind of a weird pseudo second option with Van Vliet, who is largely running the offense anyway, kind of making him the third option. We don't want his inconsistency because we've not been able to figure it out. We're not doing him any good. He's not doing us any good. So you send him to the Magic, who have a lot of young players. He's right in the age range of like Paulo Banchero, Franz Wagner. His brother's a little bit older, but Jalen Suggs, Anthony Black. He's right in that range. You say, okay, we're going to send you Jalen Green. We're going to kind of just, if we want to make other moves, we could do it, but we'll get Gary Harris back. Now, of course, the Magic are probably going to send some trades in here, whether it's some first or seconds. But this, I think, largely helps the Magic because they need some offensive capability, and Jalen Green gives you that, right? He's not the shooter that Gary Harris is necessarily, but I think as an offensive generator, he works a lot better alongside Markelle, Paulo, and Franz than, Gary Harris is just kind of the spot up, just throw him the ball and he'll shoot. This gives the Rockets another expiring contract. So if they want to make another trade, they can, or if they just want to clear 3 players off the books, they can do it. And that frees them up for some cap space in case they want to bring in a fairly low-cost vet in the offseason, or in free agency, rather. So you have some options there. But let's say you don't want to do that. Say you don't want to get rid of Jalen Green for, I wouldn't say pennies on the dollar, but something like that. Not to say that none of these guys can fill that role, but, none of them are directly as point scoring oriented necessarily. You could also go to the Hawks and say, hey, we'll give you Jalen Green, we'll give you Victor Oladipo, and we'll take DeJounte Murray, right? We'll, of course, probably send out some picks, obviously, to facilitate that. And kind of see how they like this Trae Young, Jalen Green situation. Jalen Green is not near necessarily the ball handler or creator that DeJounte Murray has been, so maybe you're good there. And then you have a more consistent scorer here on the Rockets to kind of bump them up, probably over the Lakers to an extent. But let's say you're the Rockets management and no. We've got talent. We need to win now to really validate these moves. Who do we go to really lock some stuff down? Well, I think you still have 2 options. One, you go to the Nets, and this is bringing us kind of full circle back to that Zodiac GM tweet from earlier. You get someone like Mikal Bridges, a Cam Johnson, even like a Dorian Finney-Smith. Give you that size, give you some consistency, and you probably have a good chance of jumping the Lakers and the Jazz and being competitive in that play-in race. But let's go ahead and start with Mikal Bridges, because he's kind of the most reasonable in terms of contract. You match him relatively easily with Jalen Green and Victor Oladipo, and you could probably sell the Nets on kind of redeveloping Jalen Green. As we saw, at least from a vibe standpoint, Spencer Dinwiddie would work really well with Jalen Green, and I think from a basketball perspective, that makes a lot of sense. you don't necessarily, not that Fred VanVleet's bad. He's actually one of, like, I think he's in the top 10 in assists on the year. But Fred VanVleet is a scoring option himself, right? This is why he and Jalen Green roughly have the same amount of points. You want someone like a Mike Conley for Jalen Green, who's a facilitator. And Jalen Green has the instinct to kind of know where to go. He doesn't use it all the time, but if you have someone who can facilitate, that he can kind of trust in facilitating, he can make some more wild moves, and someone can get him the ball on a cut or whatever. So you're pretty right there. Now, of course, you're probably sending out some picks, and the fun thing is, you own some of Brooklyn's picks, so if you want to give them back their first and their second, they'd probably do it, right? They don't really have a ton of their own picks available to use right now, so they're in a rough spot. But yeah, let me know. I mean, should the Rockets focus on their development, take things slow, and maybe look at moving one or two players, or do they say, we'll keep maybe some of our young players, but we can't do the 2 timeline thing like Golden State tried. We need some players that can help us now. And then you get something like this. Anyway, thanks for sticking with me. I'll see you guys tomorrow.